StephTherapy911 and the Roll Call Room podcast present Steph and Nick's Straight Talk, Stop the Stigma. Join us every Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Facebook Live. It's real, it's raw, it's uncensored. And now, here are your hosts, Steph and Nick.
Man that I had, and I could tell you who got married, who just had a baby. I could tell you that, because I paid attention to my officers, particularly young officers that are just at that point where they're not really sure if they made the right decision to put on that uniform. We've had so many incidences that have made people rethink their decision to become a law enforcement officer. And, having to deal with that, always talk to them. I go in the lunchroom and I'd be like, it's okay if the chief comes and eats with you. And always they were like, oh yeah, chief, come and sit with us. What do you want? We'll get it for you. So that kind of thing. You have to remain approachable, but they also knew that if I had to be, stern, I could be. Always fair, but always, had to get the job done. And two, what I like about, what I think about some leaders, quote unquote leaders, especially in this profession, are the ones that everything has to be like, they have to hit everything with a battering ram. When you can start a little bit lower in that, like everything is, oh, this officer did this, automatically suspend this officer, automatically administrative leave. And so everything doesn't have to be like, you don't have to be the hammer. Everything is not a nail. All right. And, and I tell you what, I've used that way of thinking for me. And there've been officers that I gave them a second chance, and they've all, not one of them has disappointed me with their second chance. And some of them right now, I've been retired for a couple of years now, but when I left, some of them had already moved up the ranks to being sergeants and lieutenants. So, sometimes you got to just take a case by case basis on how you deal with it. And it's up to you because you're the boss.
What did you learn? So you were it's one of my favorite stories is that here you are, this young rookie who's now at Port Authority. I'm sorry, who's now at of course, Port Authority PD. You're now at the World Trade Center. You're dealing with some youth that there are a couple issues with.
Right.
Lil Melody.
Yeah.
All were going to be arrested. All couldn't stop flapping their trap. And you were interviewing them. And what?
And there was a bomb. Yeah. And how, what it was, I actually backed up another officer, and then actually these teenagers were fighting on the PATH train. So we just brought everybody back, and we were actually calling parents because they were supposed to be in school, and there was a bomb. And I always talk about it, and I speak on it a lot of academy classes, because I had 14 weeks on the job. I was just as new as you could be, and here I was inside of a building with 7 other people that were dependent on me now and my partner to get them out of a building that had just blown up. So, what I always like to tell when I speak to the academy classes, I always tell them that just remember, you've chosen to put on a uniform. When the stuff hits the fan, because I'm trying not to fill up the jar on my own account, but basically when the shit
doesn't fill it up, just fuck.
Basically, when it hits the fan and you're standing there with a uniform, everyone thinks you know what to do. And that's what I learned. Everyone thinks you know what to do. you know, and you know, here I was brand new, didn't know anything really, and all of these people were counting on me because, you know, once we got outside of that room where we had them in the cells, we had to make our way out of the building, and along the way, of course, people saw us in uniform and told us to help them. And so by the time I left that building, I had maybe 70 people behind me knowing that I knew what to do, you know, and I will always say this no matter what, that day was most definitely for the grace of God that I was able to make it out of the building and I was able to bring all of those people out with me.
And that truly gave you, I mean, kind of your love for that trade center, like,
yes.
From day one.
From day one, yep, absolutely. Yes.
So, in talking to who's watching this, both of you, you know, Norma, I'm not going to avoid the fact that obviously you're Black. Haven't avoided that ever. Yeah, but
really? Oh, okay.
Don't tell your mother.
It's the backdrop.
It's a backdrop.
That's what it is. We're all Black up here.
That's awesome. You know, you've worked, you've led. The people that you have commanded, I don't believe that you've faced some of what's going on today with those that you've commanded. I think that your leadership has superseded all the other shit. What would you, in speaking to the audience, what would you want those that are on the job, that are getting stand down orders, that are literally having shit thrown at them, that leadership has now failed? Politics has now superseded employment.
Yeah.
What do you tell them to keep them going? Black, white, Hispanic, doesn't make a difference. Because when you put on that uniform,
you're blue.
You're blue.
You're blue.
So what do you tell? Because now you've got your Black officers who are Uncle Toms.
Oh yeah.
Uncle Toms.
Yes.
So how do you navigate that as a leader? How do you navigate that as a human being? And how do you, I'm putting this out to both of you, how do you navigate that as blue?
I like to hear what Don
Go ahead, you go first.
Too late, Don. I already gave it over to you. Go ahead, man.
All right. So, listen, it's a tough one, but the way I look at it this way is that, sure, there's going to be things in your life that you're going to be told what to do from when the time you're a child until the time we're on the job now that you're not going to like or not to do. I think if you maintain the internal strength that you have, we're all taught de-escalation techniques. When you have that person standing in your face, yelling and screaming at you, and you're basically trying to stand the line there in a sense of doing what your job is without escalating the situation. These are really tough times, but I truly believe, you know, and this ain't a cop-out, I truly believe that this time is going to pass. So in the meantime, if I stand the line in terms of, and I would be there, I'll be there in a situation just like that, doing what everyone else is doing and saying to them, listen, we're going to do our job. Remember deep down in your heart why you took the job, and that is the passion that you have for protecting and serving. And the overwhelming number of people in this country really, truly believe and support and thank you for what you're doing. So, I mean, I hate to say it's a cop-out, but Norm, you might have a different approach. You know, my side of the coin was mostly drug enforcement and dealing with situations where, for the most part, sometimes most of the community really supported us. It wasn't the uniform blue line that's going on right now, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
And Norma, you faced so much shit after 9/11 and the politics involved in all of that, that, you know, this face has morphed over the years.
Yeah.
And I have said, you know, on other shows, and I say it, you know, all the time, is, you know, those wearing a uniform had expected, you know, a whole lot of crap on the streets. What nobody ever anticipated was truly being hated. So how do you kind of, how do you navigate throughout your vast experience?
It's I'll tell you, it's hard because even looking back on, you know, it's like these things, and I agree with John too. I do believe that this will pass. I do believe it because it's so many times that I thought things wouldn't, as far as being out on patrol. And you know, we faced these before. We faced protests before. We faced people attacking us. You know, throwing things at you. You know, as a matter of fact, even when I worked for EMS, I decided I wanted to be a cop because I love what I did, but I got tired of people throwing shit at me. You know, because I worked in East New York. You know, I worked in East New York during the crack years. So I was like, wow, you know, I'd like to be able to defend myself a little bit better than this. So even, you know, during my time at the Port Authority, you know, we faced many groups at the World Trade Center itself. We faced, you know, it was like the week after, the month after, a couple of months after 9/11, everybody loved us. Until we had to start telling people you can't take this train or you can't go into the train station. And then we were no good again, you know? And, you know, and I always think about that because it wasn't even, you know, me working at Ground Zero. Of course, when I got sick, I got ill and they had to pull me out of Ground Zero. So then I had to do regular patrols for a couple of months. And if I tell you, people are just ridiculous, you know? The buildings had come down 2 months ago, and I have a guy screaming in my face because he didn't like the fact that he couldn't take his train that day and wanted my shield number, you know? And it was just like, of course, at that time, everybody's nerves were on edge. So, you know, I got many to bring a complaint, I will say that, you know, just because it was like, are you kidding me right now? I could be home with my family, and here I am trying to protect you, you know, basically from yourself at this point. And that's where, you know, that line of thinking has to be with the officers now that are standing there and being berated, being having things thrown at them, you know, black, white, blue, brown, purple, you know, they're all people. And I love this thing that I saw, that when you lump everybody together, people don't want you to lump them all together as criminals, but you want to lump all the cops together as the bad guy, as the racist, murdering, you know, are there bad cops? Of course there are. They're bad everything, you know? And the problem is that now all cops suck? No, I don't think so. And I really don't think the public, the hardworking, go to work every day, have a dream public, really is feeling all of this animosity that is being thrown at us. I think it's an opportunity for people that are anti-cop. I think that right now the police are the scapegoats, and they're also the easy target because they do have to stand there. They do have to come in and do their job every day. I think it's really, really atrocious that they're not backed by the politicians that can make the rules and regulations for the chiefs of these departments that have to follow. You know, when you have someone that backs you, it makes a difference because that comes down the line. I think that as a leader in law enforcement, the chiefs, the sergeants, the lieutenants, they have to continuously show the patrol officers, the SWAT officers, the ones that have to stand there and be thrown, they have to show them that, you know, they support them. There has to be some kind of mechanism where they believe that they're supported, or else you just will, if we have no police, then we're just in a shitload of trouble. I'll tell you that right now. So, you know, but it is very hard.
Yeah, and just to add to that, you're absolutely right, Norm. I mean, the leading by example, that goes a long way by the folks underneath your command, as you very well know. So when we're standing strong, and we're doing exactly what they're doing, that goes a long way. It is, like you said, there are bad guys in every field. There are bad attorneys, bad doctors, bad lawyers, and obviously
Bad
there's
shrinks.
bad cops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, but again, overall law enforcement is very good because the foundation of it is obviously is to protect and serve, and that's the reason why the majority of the police officers out there take the jobs. So, like I said, it was an interesting story. Maybe just to add kind of to this at the time being, a lot of this, as we all know, is anti-cop out there. Is in line the other day getting coffee, and the guy next to me, the lady at the counter says, "Your coffee is paid for." I don't even know I go, "What happened?" No, I don't take a free cup of coffee. Kind of jokingly. She goes, "No. The man in the truck right there paid for your coffee," and I didn't even get a chance to thank him. He was gone.
Yeah, I've had that happen to me too. That at the drive-through window, when I was working, because I had my take-home car, and I stopped for breakfast, and the lady was like, "Oh no, the lady up ahead of you paid for that already, so you're good."
And that's what goes right. It's when the cops are being poisoned.
Yeah.
Right.
When they're now afraid to go to the drive-through, they're afraid to wear a uniform out in public. For the first time, and it's somebody, Norma, that you had introduced me to, finally told his family, take everything off of your vehicles.
Right.
Nothing that identifies you in law enforcement. Don't
Right.
wear the shirts.
Right.
The kids, like, how the hell do you explain this? And where's leadership? I had spoken to some of the guys from LAPD, and Daryl Gates had a wonderful reputation out here. He just didn't give a shit. He did the right thing. He didn't give a shit about anything but his men. And you watch that throughout his career. And like, where is the Daryl Gates? And I just, I did not work for him. I'm not going to promote him. It is what I have heard. So it's just hearsay. I'm sure people couldn't stand him either, as with every position.
Everything, yeah.
But where are the leaders that are heading up these huge departments? Like NYPD. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, it's funny, I can't name everyone that I've seen, but there are those that have really impressed me, particularly in this past month. I like to follow women leaders, particularly because, no matter what, no matter how evolved everyone thinks they are, people do view women differently in law enforcement. That's just the way it is. They will always, it's always like we have to do just a little bit more just to get the same recognition. And so I like to follow women that are really like practicing what they preach and being leaders, and the chief in Dallas, that, they did I believe she was the one that told them, if you break the law, you're gonna get arrested.
Yep.
Right. And she went out and she totally, she feels for them. She's a Black woman. She's in a leadership position. But once they broke that law, she arrested them. And then she said that. She said, "But I told you I was gonna arrest you." And I think that it's hard to, you have Vera Bumpers, who is the chief of Metro PD in Washington, another strong leader. There's so many, so I don't want to just say a couple of names and think that it stops at that. There are strong leaders out. And then, the problem too being that you can be a strong leader, but as I said it time and time again, if you do not have the backing and support of the people that rule over you, and that's basically what it is, when you have politicians that rule over you and can relieve you of your post if you don't do what they want you to do, or as I found throughout in my case, those that have gone higher than you in a level or two, and they want you gone, but they won't really make you be gone. So they'll just try to just make your life miserable forever until you do leave. And I know, John, you know about that, and I'm sure Nick would speak on that also. But you know, I can speak on that because I've lived it.
Yeah, Norma,
So,
I could speak on that. I wrote a whole book about it.
yes, I know. Actually, I'm going to be buying that this week. But yes, I know that. So it's really hard. And now you have people that they are strong leaders. And what do? You get, you know, you go back to that. You're not accepted by, and two, that's the other thing, because I find that most people that you're not accepted by your community, like, okay, me, Black community, you know, come up with really, really great names for you, you know, and some of them I just have to wear with pride, but not Uncle Tom being one, or Auntie Tomaline, or whatever the heck it is these days, you know. I have young officers that I still talk to now that they're just like in that crisis mode, because they're like, it's not even worth it for me to, you know, I'm just like, why do I want to go to work? I'm stressed all the time. If I say boo to somebody, you know, they're, you know, I'm punished, or I'm remanded, or I'm whatever. But meanwhile, you know, people are forgetting that these cops are humans, and how much can a human take? And then people tell me this nonsense about, well, they're supposed to be trained to be able to deal with, you know, but that's fine and good, but they're still people. If you continuously tell them every single day, 16 hours a day, that stand in this place and be spit upon and things thrown at you that could kill you. Okay, yeah. I saw some videos this week that just were horrendous. And at some point, you see, and that's the thing too, because some of my friends that have known me as from when I was a cop, I tell you, I'm a way kinder, gentler person. And God help me, I am so happy. Honestly, I am. I would not lie. Because if I were a cop today, I don't know. I don't know if I would have stayed on the force long enough to move up the ranks. You know? And the one more thing I want to say about that also, Stephanie, is the people that are the people that are anti-cop have been anti-cop. Okay, it's not that this poor man was killed and now we're going to come out and we're going to be anti-cop. Protesters going to come out because they want to protest bad things. Did something bad happen? Yes. A few bad things happened, and a few bad people did them. A few were mistakes, and a few were people that just didn't give a damn because they felt that they could just do whatever the hell they wanted. But people, especially people of color, they've been dealing with that forever. And it didn't make me a bad cop. You know, when I was a kid, there was a kid in my neighborhood that was killed by the police. And I remember, and I'm not dating myself, but I remember my mother, God bless her, is back then she was on the front page of the New York Post being dragged down the street by the police because she spoke up at this kid's funeral about them. They were blocking the block and people couldn't get in to go to the funeral home. So my mother went to the police officer to speak about it. Now you got to figure about what I'm quite up there right now, because so it had to be quite a while, you know, like you're talking maybe 40, 45 years ago. Yeah. And that didn't make me, you know, I didn't love the police at that point. I didn't like the police when I was a teenager, and they always chased me and my friend. You know, I couldn't stand them. But it was one cop that was, and I never forget him. I was like 15, 16 years old. One officer that talked some sense into me because, you know, he said to me then, and it rings true today. If you're not going to try to be the solution, then stop bitching about the problem.
Yes.
There you
right?
go.
And that is my.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, and that's been what I've tried to mold myself as. And you know, and if you're not going to try to be a part of pollution, then shut up. You know, stop talking, because we're tired of hearing. You know.
Well, so. Norma, I want to add a couple of things. You bring up a lot of really, really good points. I was waiting for my water to kick in for me to start talking. Quite a few things that you brought up. So the one of the big issues that we're having with mental health in law enforcement right now tends to be at the chief, to sergeant level. That tends to be the big bulk of the problem. The sergeant level more because once you make that transition from officer to sergeant, it's one of the hardest jumps that you'll ever make in your career because you're now not part of them, but you also are part of management, but you have to balance the friendships that you had before with now being quote unquote a company man or company woman. It's one of the most difficult jobs. I used to call it the shit sandwich when I was a sergeant because I get it from the bottom up and then from the top down.
Yeah.
And it was one of the worst positions, but also it taught me really good about, crisis intervention. And it taught me about diplomacy. It taught me about management. And I had a lot of really good mentors to emulate around me that were good sergeants. What I find now, we're talking about at the chief level, the problem that we're finding, especially now with the anti-cop movement and the riots, I really don't call them protests anymore because the majority of them are just riots. And the problem is that a lot of chiefs are political appointees. They are, they're appointed by a city manager or a mayor, and their lifespan is anywhere from 3 to 5 years. And they want to make that lifespan. They want to last that time. Pension wise, whatever, for the good of the order, for the good of whatever. But they're a political appointee in times when it was peacetime. So a lot of these chiefs that are experiencing these riots, to no fault of their own, they're peace chiefs. They're not wartime chiefs. They didn't go through, the LA riots. They didn't go through riots in Chicago. We don't have those chiefs anymore. We don't have those battle-worn chiefs a lot anymore. And a lot of them are not leading with their heart. A lot of them are not leading with morale in mind. They're dealing with the politics, the fallout of the politics. And that's how officers wind up getting hurt, is because they watch their city that they have worked in for many, many years getting burned down. Graffiti is at a ridiculous amount in New York City. I grew up and born and raised in New York City, 28 years I lived there. I look now, it's sad that I was a part of the nuisance patrol that cleaned up the graffiti in New York. And now look, it's just, you can just go up to any building and spray paint with no repercussions.
Right.
So my point that I'm making is I think a lot of the problem is that these chiefs don't want to stand up and say, no, we're not going to stand down. You speak about female leadership, the chief in Seattle. I watch her very, very closely. When the mayor finally decided to take CHOP, whatever it is, the 7 blocks that were illegally taken over, she stood by and waited at headquarters, and she hugged and handshaked every single officer that went into Chaz and took back the 7 streets, the 7 blocks. And then recently, the town council, or whatever they are, elected officials, took the ability to use pepper spray, took the ability to use CS and CN gas, any countermeasures in a protest to disperse a crowd. They took that away. So the chief, she goes, next riot that happens, ladies and gentlemen, buckle up, because it's the purge. We're not going in there. I'm not going to send my troops in there with no non-lethal force options. Right. And all of us that are here that were sworn officers know we want the non-lethal option. Right. There were so many times where I used my OC or my baton or my taser, right, rather than use lethal force. And once you take that use of force and continuum away from them, it's really a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Norma, I definitely agree with you. I watch female, I'm just like you. I watch female law enforcement, especially in the leadership, because it is very tough in this profession. It is a male-driven profession, but I have had the pleasure of working with some of the greatest females. And then the problem that I find with female commandship is that they don't elevate each other. It's one of the saddest things I've ever seen, which is that they don't pick somebody to mentor and help elevate them so that they don't go through and Norma, you should know this because you came up through the ranks during tough times in transit. You don't want the next female underneath you going through what you went through to get your stripes, to get your butter bar, to get your double butter bar, and so on and so forth. We don't see that anymore. And now with the younger generation joining the workforce, we need to see that. We need to see more mentorship. We need to see more career development. We need to see that kind of stuff, and we're not. And I know I'm very long-winded here, but my other point is, because we're going through this problem with law enforcement, the anti-cop movement, we're losing a tremendous amount of officers, new and old, to the point where the NYPD has put a halt to putting your paperwork in for retirement.
Yes.
That's a scary, scary time, because now I could tell you from experience, when I left my agency the first time I left through retirement and then I came back, one of the hardest things to do is to convince yourself it's time to go on your own accord.
Yeah.
You know, Norma, you know how hard it is. You love the job. You love the people that you're with. When you make that decision that it's done, you're ready to hang up your gun belt, it's time to go. When you're telling somebody that they can't go now you're creating a whole other different mental health condition. Now you're causing this person to stay in a job that they mentally have convinced themselves to check out. And on top of that, you're screwing with their top three. And those of you that aren't in law enforcement that don't know what the top three is, I'll explain it to you. Your last year on the job, Nora, you can tell me if I'm wrong, because I've been out of the NYPD.
Not everybody does top three, but
not everybody.
NYPD does.
NYPD does, but now this halt on putting paper in, your top three last years get average, and that's what your retirement is for the rest of your life. So a lot of these folks that have been on the job 25 years or 20 years, they've already done their last three and already had the figure worked out in their head. They're like, okay, March 1, I'm ready to go. I've already put in the 3 years of my top pay. I'm ready to go. And now the NYPD, or I'm sorry, the city is saying, no, you're delayed 6 months. That can have drastic effects on somebody's
it's scary.
finances.
Yeah.
It's scary
mental
because,
health too. You know,
although I will tell you that there's plenty of overtime. If they do delay your retirement, there is plenty of overtime for you in New York City, Chicago, Atlanta, Seattle, and Portland right now. So if you're in those cities, send me and Steph a check. We love them.
So how do you deal with the mental health? So here's the thing. We are watching, I mean, I'd be remiss in not mentioning the deputy chief that just killed himself in Chicago.
Yes.
Just got promoted. I mean, we are seeing the uptick now. And that's another lead by example, is how do you get your own the help that they need, and taking away the stigma, because they're not supposed to see the shit that they see. They're not supposed to be experiencing this. And this is different. This is a hatred. This is an alienation that many of these officers have never experienced before.
Right.
Is how do you tell an officer to get help? How does it not affect the rest of their careers?
Right.
Because as they keep enduring this, you get shit at work, you're not supported there, you go home, you've got a wife or a husband or a significant other that doesn't kind of understand the stress. They want to know where you want to go or what you want to eat for dinner. You're thinking, I really don't give a shit what I eat for dinner. It doesn't make a goddamn bit of difference. I've been making decisions all day long. Just pick something. And they don't understand those stressors. So they just keep it all bottled up inside. And then you've got I didn't see it coming. I mean, all those shouldas, couldas, and wouldas that go along with every suicide.
Yep.
Is how do we, as a nation, as officers, I mean, Norma, you have gotten people into therapy. You've been willing to do it yourself. John, this was important in your agencies. But how do you do that? And one of the biggest things is that leading by example. is being able to say, this is something that I will do for myself.
Exactly. And
Right.
and I think that makes a difference. You know, so many things rolled up into that statement. First of all, I will say, you know, I was fortunate when I came on the job. I had a great mentor. You know, I had someone who brought me up through the ranks with her. You know, always watched my back, always make sure I was okay. So I was very fortunate with that. And the few women that had come before me, because remember when I joined the Port Authority Police Department, there were only about 52 women. You know,
And how big is the department? Give everybody an idea of how big Port Authority is. How many officers do you have?
Back then it was about I think like a 1,500 person department. I think it's more like a 2,000 person, 2,500 something now. Okay. And there are like 200 women now, but back then you know very few women. In my academy class was 41 people. There were 3 women, and I was the only Black woman. And in the whole class, there were only 5 Black recruits. So that's where we were. And I will tell you that when you talk about what do you do, you know, it's unfortunate, but right up to from the time I was a cop, someone has committed suicide. Right from being a cop. I was a cop at PATH, had a great tour with this guy, this young guy, and we worked the midnight shift. You know, we were all hanging out, BSing, went home, killed himself in his car before he went into the house. And all throughout my career, there have been officers, you know, it just is astounding to me because even as a sergeant, I mean, this is something that you have to know too. It does affect the bosses that actually care about their people, you know, because I was a sergeant at the World Trade Center. I can never forget this. I was a sergeant. It was Friday. I talked to one of the guys. This guy came to work all the time with a big ass smile on his face every day. If he wasn't smiling, you knew it was just a bad day. And I said, you know, goodbye to him. He was doing a lot of overtime, and we were all teasing him because he had just bought a van, because we said that he had a lot of kids, so now he needed something to take his kids around. I mean, just bullshit like cops do. And I was the sergeant on duty, and he left. We went home. It was Friday. I said, "Am I going to see you anymore?" He's like, "Oh yes, Sergeant. I'll be back to make some more money, you know." And I'm sitting at home. It was a holiday weekend. I'm sitting in my house, and I look at that TV, and a special report came over the news that there was a murder-suicide. And I'm looking and I see the police tape and I see the house, and I'm, you know, it's not just dawned on me. And then I start getting the phone calls. Oh, did you hear? Did you hear? I'm like, I'm watching TV. Why do I know this area? Why do I know this place? Why do I know this? And it was this cop. This cop went home, got into an argument with his wife. His kids were there, but his kids ran out of the house, shot his wife, and shot himself. Okay, so all of this with the stigma, as you talk about, Steph, it was like when I first went to my first meeting, and when you talk about lead by example, I will tell anybody that wants to hear me, okay? Because when I went through the first bombing at the Trade Center, and they sent us, they really didn't know what they were supposed to do or how to handle us, those of us that survived, those of us that had that, you know, we had been going all day, pulling people out of the building, dealing with the injuries, looking for people that were missed. They didn't know how to deal with us. They brought us into a room. They sat us in a room with some person that you could obviously see that we were bothering his time, to ask us if we're all okay. And then shame on you if you said you weren't okay. Because you didn't get the, oh, you know, we understand, we're gonna get you help, no, you didn't get any of that. Because I said, what do you mean? I said, you know, I watched somebody walking around with their eye popped out of their head today. Just point blank, like that. And then they turned the tape off. Because they didn't want to hear what I had to say. And I always remembered that, and I always brought that up with me. And as a commanding officer, having so many officers that have committed suicide and having to deal with the friends and the other officers, you know, and I'm just so thankful that that I did have Stephanie, like she says, I have referred people to her. I have an outstanding gentleman named Pete Colleen that I brought to be able to talk to my officers in these crisis times, because now you have to worry about the officers that are left, after something like this happens.
Yeah.
And that's, that's it. I mean, and it's finding those culturally competent people. It's making sure there's no repercussions for getting that help, and making sure that you stay connected to those people. And Nick, you're going to talk. I also want John to chime in on that, because he had a difficult situation that he navigated really well. So.
Yeah, John, you go first.
Sure. Yeah, and similar to Norma's situation, this was back, I gotta say, what was it? I'm trying to think now, 2010. I was the acting SAC for the New Jersey Field Division, and it was my first day as acting SAC. My longtime friend and boss, former SAC, retired, and I get the call, and it was a very good friend of mine and a former assistant special agent in charge with DEA Newark. He committed suicide. And that was my first day assuming the job as SAC. Obviously he was retired, but the call came in as he's missing. He took the battery out of his phone. He left his, all the indicators. He left his badge, his retired badge, and his wallet and his car by his father's house. And he went into the woods. So we spent 2 days looking for him, and ultimately we found him. And this was a guy that, again, you'd never believe that he would do something like that. He was normally, he was like the person that you were talking about, always jovial. He had retired. He was happy. He had another job. And the way we would, the hard part was that night going to his family's house and talking to the kids that I knew, talking about how dad had some demons that he just couldn't deal with. And unfortunately, that's what happened to him. But so I made it a point thereafter. I mean, DEA had a crisis intervention team that kind of worked with things. But what I did from that was when, and I'll just talk about how we're dealing with it now. I'll go back to Union. But in Monmouth, what we did was, and Steph, you helped me with this as well, and Cop to Cop to Help, we have regular resiliency training for everyone in the division. Obviously, crime scene is horrible. The sex crimes is horrible. The child advocate, the ICAC, the internet crimes against children, those images they have to look at, they're all horrible, but we make it mandatory for everyone to go there. And what I do in those situations, I lead by example, and I'm in there with everybody, and I talk about how, again, parlaying from the experience in Union County that I dealt with, that we'll talk about in a minute, Steph, is the cup that we as cops hold all this information and all this trauma, all this negativity. It just gets to a certain point. Other people's cups are really big and nice, and other people's are full, and they need to be emptied. And I would say that these resiliency gatherings that we do is the whole purpose there is to empty the cup. And I said, it just varies at where you are in your life and certain factors. It just doesn't make sense sometimes that you got to go and speak to, like I do often with Stephanie, to empty the cup, and to others, whoever you might feel comfortable with,
Exactly.
that are really experienced in this law enforcement arena, can sit there and say, I understand how you feel, what you're thinking is absolutely normal, and we're going to work with you here to empty that cup.
Yeah.
So that's really how I got rid of that whole stigmatism, is again, leading by example, talking about myself, how I dealt with certain things in my career, talking about emptying my cup and how important it is for them to empty their cup. And that was just, again, that's how you break down that stigmatism of why, because remember, Norm, when you and I were on the job, it was like, no one talked about this. In the beginning,
No way.
It was all happy-go-lucky, right? If you talk to anyone, you're afraid you'd lose your job.
Oh, I was told that I shouldn't say certain things that I was thinking or feeling. I was told, don't let the bosses hear you say that. They're gonna take your gun, and you're gonna be in trouble.
Yeah, so I mean that's how I kind of broke down that wall and is to tell them that it's okay, and to say that even myself, I too have to empty my cup.
That's the key. The key is when you have your leaders that are willing to out themselves. That is how you start to truly break down that stigma. And should you have kept that to yourself, that sends a very clear message, because what it says is this is okay for you, but not me.
Right.
And you know, it's that whole how we raise kids. Do as I say, not as I do. Bullshit.
Right.
Bullshit.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and I can tell you from being the other flip side of the coin, as being the one that's attempted to do it, I didn't feel very very welcome to go get help in my department. And then after I did it, I kept it quiet. And then I had supervisors and commanders that kind of were like, you know, why are you taking so much sick leave? Why are you always taking leave? You know, your performance evaluation is going to suffer because you're taking too much leave. Never ask the question. It's okay to ask the question.
Right.
What's going on at home? Are you okay? Why are you using so much leave? So much so it's kind of ironic, because I put my book out, and then I've had a couple, like one commander and two supervisors reach out to me and be like, Nick, I didn't know you were going through all that. I didn't know that happened. And I said, then you've learned something from the book, because you should be asking. When I was a sergeant, I would routinely, I knew, like what Norma said, I knew my guys' wife's birthdays and their kids' birthdays. And I knew that if Norma walked in and I didn't get this certain look, I knew something was wrong that day.
Yes.
Yes.
And there's nothing wrong with sending somebody home that day. There's nothing wrong with sending them home, bringing them in your office and saying, hey, listen, I don't feel comfortable with you being out there because you're not 100% mentally checked in.
But it's also finding out, because if home's the issue, that's not where you send them to.
Right.
It's
Right.
being able to sit back and say, what's going on?
Yeah.
Right.
And then going from there.
And I could say this too, which is how many times, John and Norma, you can attest this. How many times have we had people come into roll call and try and sell us life insurance or you know, Aflac or whatever other shit that they want to sell.
Yeah.
You know, they get a real estate broker that just got their license. They come in, they pass out business cards. I'm police friendly, blah, 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 and they're handing out business cards like it's cotton candy.
Yeah.
How many
Yep.
times have we had a Nick come into roll call and say, hey, folks, listen, I did 20 years in law enforcement. These are the positions that I held. As a supervisor, I did this, I did that, I did this. You know, it was the greatest job in my life. I truly love it. I miss it. Hey, and by the way, in May of 2019, I tried to kill myself.
Right.
I guarantee you'd hear crickets in roll call.
Oh yeah.
And people would be like, what the fuck? It's my dollar.
That's a dollar.
They would say that, and they would be like, what is going on?
Yeah.
And you have to put it in a way where, one, they don't feel defensive, and two, you have to tell them, hey, listen, there is no shame in you going to see a therapist, and by God, there's no shame of you taking medication.
Right.
You know, what I was before I took medication and what I am now, I think I'm even funnier, you know, which I didn't think was possible. But and all kidding aside, is I think the big stigma is that we don't have from the top, you know, beating that drum that it's okay not to be okay. But I will tell you this, what feels so good is that because we've had so many losses in the last 2 years in suicides, is finally getting the national recognition. It is finally getting people to speak up and people to turn around and write books about it and do podcasts about it and do stuff like this and have guests like you two come on and say, it's okay not to be okay. And the days when I came up in law enforcement was the same. Well, not the same. I'm a lot younger than you, John and Norma. Don't look at these. Don't look at those.
Nick.
Yeah. And Stephanie, way younger than Stephanie.
Yeah. Although the
But
Botox, you gotta admit,
no,
it
no
helped.
Botox for me.
It helped.
This is my
helped.
Botox. My eyes just
It
stink.
helped.
But we are miles away from where we all came up, because I remember the same thing. I remember having an officer commit suicide, and then like same thing as you, Norma. They brought everybody into a room. They had this person come in from crisis team, and this person didn't even know the person who committed suicide's name.
Right.
It was so impersonal. It was just like, all right, we got this checkbox. We got to get it done. Your chief, your chief says that we got to debrief. Everybody good? All right, get out there and fight crime. Now it's so much more different. And we're miles away from where we should be. I'll tell you that. We're miles away from where we should be. But I think the younger generation, and we've talked about this in other episodes, the millennial generation is the generation that's going to fix law enforcement's mental health problem. That's my.
I don't know if they're going to fix the problem.
Well, they're going to help. They're going to help the problem.
I will absolutely think that I will agree that they have been raised in a far more accepting environment to be able to go talk to people.
Right. But I do think that not the millennial generation, but the younger supervisors and commanders coming up will be the ones too, like Stephanie said, will be the ones who actually fix it. Because
I do think that,
because I think the dinosaurs are dying off. I think I hate to put it that way, and I don't mean die off as in, but they're retiring.
And old guys.
They're old guys, all right? I don't want to say die off, but in all honesty, that is the big problem is that you have a lot of people that are leading agencies that are dinosaurs that are still not buying into, PTSD as an issue, or that taking medication, you can still carry a gun while you're taking medication.
Right.
And I had a very long talk with Lieutenant Dave Grossman. You guys know who that is. Wrote a whole bunch of books. And one of his beliefs that he is really pushing is going from a chief system to a sheriff's system across the United States, which is as an elected official every 3 years. And it's not a political appointee, meaning that the mayor and the city manager doesn't appoint them. They have to run for office. And if they don't do their job in 3 years, they're out of there. And as a sheriff, when you get elected, guess who could tell you what to do and what not to do? No one but the people that voted for you. And then you wouldn't have the problems that you have in Chicago and all these other. I know I'm going off on a tangent, but just food for thought. That's one of the things that I think with politics and policing and police reform needs to be looked at, which is how are we appointing our chiefs? What's the criteria? What's the criteria? A couple of master's degrees?
And see that, I talk about that because, when I came on the job, you didn't have to have the 60 credit and what have you. I had been in the military for quite some time at that point because I was kind of older when I came on the job. My class was older. Our median age was like 32. So we had lived a little bit, and done things. And I understand what you're saying about the younger generation of future leaders in law enforcement, because, and I'll give you an example too, how I really understand this, is some bosses are just afraid. They're afraid to even ask the question because you really might tell them how you really feel it. And that is terrifying to them. And I know this to be true because after 9/11, I was down at Ground Zero, of course. Everyone was there forever. And none of us slept. We didn't get sleep because we were going back. We were digging. We were on the pile. We go rest. And so we were exhausted. So I went into the female locker room and I had some downtime. So there was just these little like single people benches. There was nowhere really to lay down. But from being in the military, I can sleep standing up. I'll tell you that. So I figured, I'll just catch a little cat nap. So I took off my belt, I put it down, no one else was in the locker room, and I fell asleep on the bench. Well, the next thing I know, I wake up and I say, okay, time to go back out and dig. And my partner at the time comes in and she goes, oh, is everything okay? Are you all right? And I'm like, yeah, I just was exhausted. I needed a nap. Well, apparently while I was taking my nap, some civilian came in to clean the female locker rooms because we were using the college at the time. And the civilian came in to clean the locker room and observed me sleeping, but didn't know I was asleep. So went out and told my boss that I was in the fetal position, and my gun was on the floor. That's how that person described me. So of course my boss, not wanting to have to deal with the fact that if I was thinking of hurting myself, went and found my partner to send her in to make sure I was okay. And then I had to come out and I had to talk to counselors that were on scene at Ground Zero who were 15 years old, that had no idea about life at all. And the fact that we were out there looking for my friend buried under a building, and they're telling me, oh, well, we understand that you're in the grieving process. No, you don't. No, you don't. You don't understand anything about my grieving process. So then I had to tell them, I know the grieving process. And no, I'm not going to hurt myself. And no, because guess what? I got to go find my friends' bodies maybe that I can bring to their families so they have something to bury.
Right.
I was tired, but they did. They took my gun. They took my gun at Ground Zero and made me go talk to these people. And so finally, when I finally just told them, you don't even know what you're talking, there's no way you can deal with me, let me get back to what I was doing. And finally, one boss was like, okay, you know what? She's fine. This is the Norma we know. She's fine. If she's cursing you out, she's fine.
Yeah. And that's kind of it. It's, and that's kind of in wrapping up. It's knowing your employee, who's working for you, knowing their personalities, knowing how they handle stress. As John had mentioned, which I love, is having a bio on each person so that their spouses, their kids, important dates, what they want in case they're involved in a critical incident, what they want in case of a death, God forbid that happens, line of duty or outside. Right. So I wanted to give you guys kind of a 2-minute wrap up on what it is that you want that leaves us on a positive note for those that are watching and tuned in to deal with the current situation, how to keep their head about them, and the importance of kind of leadership. What is it that's, John?
So, all right. So let me ask you something. Well, this is what I like to say. The first thing I'd like to say is just like Nick was saying. I want to make sure that all cops understand that it's okay not to be okay. It's okay to ask for help. Because I got to tell you, I'm part of the International Chiefs of Police Association, and there's been so much pushed out through all the chiefs in the world, now not only in the country, but in the world on how important this is, how important from Nick going back from the dinosaur ages to where we are now. And, I'm probably one of those dinosaurs, but I have evolved into what, obviously through personal experiences, into that more resilient type acceptance chief as well as cop, in terms of managing our people, and just always make sure that as a leader, you just make sure that they know you care. Those little things always mean a lot. Like me, I see someone's out for a couple of days, send a text, just checking on you. See, I now only have 79 cops that work for me, but just checking in. Hey, you okay? That's it. Just a simple little thing. Like you said, Norm, my door is always open. I've had people come up to me and say, Chief, everything from career advice to, Chief, I really like to talk to you about some things I'm having at home. Steph, and you and I had talked many times, and I've had this. So to have my troops come to me and be able to talk to me with openness, I think that's a great accomplishment that I've been able to instill in the organization. And I always want to make sure that they know that I'm there for them. So, in a nutshell, the other side of the thing, when we talk about, law enforcement in general and the current state we're in, Nick, the one thing, I think you were in NYPD, but the one thing in New Jersey, it's a little different. Again, I'm at a prosecutor's office, so I am an appointed person. However, when you talk about the municipalities of which we have roughly 46 police departments, 53 police agencies in Monmouth County, is we don't have that so much that political side of things, because there's a thing in New Jersey called the Chief's Bill of Rights, which basically separates any interference from the political bodies. Now, it's not 100% pure, but for them to step the line to daily operations in a department, they cannot do that. And a lot of these chiefs in New Jersey have contracts. Now, what do they do in that contract year that they're trying to get that contract? It's another thing. But I got to tell you, with all of the police agencies in New Jersey, with that Police Bill of Rights, it really protects the chiefs to allow them to do their job without interference on the day-to-day operations of political interference. Now, they can mess with their budgets and they can do certain things like that, but not when it comes to the daily operations of a police department.
Yeah.
Nice.
Okay.
Norma?
Yeah.
No pressure.
Everything that John said, is so it's so pertinent, especially today. And that's what I try to do always as a leader, if you want to use that word leader. I was a cop first and a cop foremost, and when I retired, I was still a cop. I might have gained the rank of chief, but I was still a cop. I'm still a cop now. I love what I did. Love what I did. Love my agency. My department, my men and women that worked under me. And as with everything else, you need some tweaking going on, but that's everywhere. So with what's going on today, the people that are the quote unquote leaders, because leaders don't have to be people with a lot of brass on their collar. You have some officers that they just are born leaders, that their classmates, their academy mates look up to them. And I would try to instill that in them too, to take care of each other, because it's hard for you to, when people, I would go to roll calls and give them my phone number. I give out my phone number and people would be like, Chief, why are you giving your phone number out? And I say, yeah, because I want you to have my phone number. If you have an emergency and you need me, you call me. And then I would tell them, that doesn't mean you drink too much and you forget where you parked your car. You don't call me to ask me, to help you find your car, because that's not going to happen, And don't try to prank call me, because if you prank call me, I'll hunt you down and I'll find out who you are, But every single roll call, almost every command I ever had, they had my phone number, and a couple of them didn't need to use it, unfortunately. It was unfortunate at that point where they did need to use it. So what I would say to these leaders right now that are going through these things, and these bosses and these supervisors, just remember that, relate to your people and make sure your people understand that you're not a robot either. We all have our bad days. You cannot come in, but you cannot come in and just be perfect all the time. No, I'm having a lousy, shitty ass day today too. But let's all have a lousy, shitty ass day today. Let's try to make it through this tour, and let's try to do what we have to do. But I'm there with you. I'll back you up. And if you're right, I always stand by your side. If you're wrong, I will reprimand you. All right. But in this climate today, they have to feel like somebody has their back, because right now I know I talk to a lot of young officers and they just do not feel it. And then I get officers that go, oh, I wanted to hear what your opinion is on what's going on today. And I have so many, and some of them are not popular. And of course, that's never stopped me from expressing them. But, I like for people to understand that we understand, and John, I know you understand that there are shitty cops out there. There are bad officers. Okay?
Yes, there are.
That does not mean that everyone puts on their uniform and decides that they're going to go out and they're going to be the bad guy. A lot of people put on their uniform because they want to be the good guy, and they want to come out and help the people in their communities, and just stop making them all the enemy, And for all the officers that have to work, that you're feeling the stress of the situations that are going on now, you have to talk about it. Don't take it home to your family. Don't take it home to your kids. Don't kick your dog when you get in the house, okay? You got to talk to somebody, and it's up to the bosses to make them know they're the ones that they can talk to about these things. Yeah, so that's my 2 minutes, I think.
Good job, Norma.
Thank you.
I truly can't thank you both enough. I mean, it's just, it's such an important subject. Is such, it's something that we're going to continue to just hammer, because that leadership component in departments, and the leading by example, and truly by the time you get to go up in rank, you have years behind you, you have a wealth of experience. The question is, what do you do with that? And again, as much as you can be part of the problem, part of the solution, do you use it for good or do you use it for evil? Pretty simple. So thank you both for being part of the solution, not the problem, and continuing to give in what you both are doing. And I feel very blessed to have both of you in my life. So
thank you guys.
Thank you, Steph. Thank you for everything. Thank you, Nick, and thank you, Norma.
Yes, thank you, John.
So we're going to wrap it up. I just wanted to give one source for leaders that are out there, future leaders, commanders that are out there right now, on concerned officers, COPS, concerns of police survivors. If you go on there under other resources, there is a form on there for survivor packet, something that I used to have all of my officers fill out the first day they would work for me. And it basically plans your entire funeral for you, who you want there, who you don't want there, who do you want to be notified first, and who do you want to make the notifications. This is extremely important as a supervisor and as a leader. It's free. Just go onto the website and you can print it out. It's in PDF form. We will post it on our Facebook as a link. So even if your department doesn't do it, you should print this out, fill it out, put it in your safe, let your loved one know where it is, or give it to your supervisor to put in your squad file. It's extremely helpful, and it's a good tool to have. I only say that because we just had a chief from Chicago, assistant chief, kill himself.
Yeah.
From what I'm understanding is that there is a lot of confusion as to beneficiaries and other stuff like that. So that's a very avoidable thing. So
and I'm going to piggyback on that. The International Law Enforcement Training Summit just actually finished. They are an organization that is absolutely phenomenal. They just did a week actually free for individuals, where they got, I believe it is 7 continents and 45 different countries, as well as, obviously the United States and throughout the world, to be able to deal with some of the stressors that are going on, mental health being one of their biggest focuses. That, to please go online, look at, they dealt with leadership a lot during this training. So phenomenal resource, phenomenal individuals. With COVID, one of the nice things is that we really are able to access an amazing amount of resources now via Zoom.
Yeah.
So being able to hold international conferences that you might not have been able to afford or to be able to get to be able to offer officers some of the best training that we can in the world, by just being able to sit, at an office and allocate the time, which John, I know that you would do, or even, when they're home. So just kind of always keeping up on the new norm and some of the positive stuff that's coming out of COVID.
Yeah.
And next week, we're going to be dealing with heroes. And the perception of that in law enforcement and the community. Because in my career, I have never met any officer who has ever believed that they are a hero, that they were only doing their job, yet the pressure that goes on in having the label of being a hero, and the pain that doesn't get to be dealt with because one can be looked at like that. So I've got retired officer Jim McGrath from New York City Police Department. He's involved in a critical incident where he was actually shot in the head, obviously survived. did receive the Medal of Honor, which is rare for NYPD. It is normally given posthumously. So he will come on and talk about that, as well as 9/11 and what that was like in his role. And then retired Detective Kevin McGill from the Boston Police Department, who was located at the finish line during the Boston bombing. And he is one of the officers that was featured in Sports Illustrated for both right after the bombing, as well as after the Red Sox had won the pennant that year. So both gonna come on, talk about kind of the pressure and pain of heroes, difficulty in talking about this, and really people not understanding, because for officers that haven't been involved in critical incidents, some of what goes on kind of underneath, and particularly when there's the public who, you know, wants to see the individuals and they truly don't want to talk about it because that was the worst day of their life. So that's what's going on for next week. So I look forward to seeing everybody. Nick, thank you for another great week.
Thank you.
And
Yes, thank you, Nick.
Next week.
Thank you, Norma. Thank you, John. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you, Nick.
Everybody, take good care of each other, and we'll see you back here next Sunday, 7 p.m. Eastern time. And take good care of each other. All right.